everybody. Thank you so much for coming along to the second Inspire Me series. Don't worry if you've missed the first one, it's all online and I'll tell you how to access that at the end of the session. Welcome. And we are speaking with inspiring figures who have graduated from UE and formed ambitious, inclusive, innovative and enterprising paths. I'm Molly Rose Crossley. I'm a third year media production student. I'm on the journalism pathway. So I'm really excited to be meeting all of these amazing people from UE. So how this is going to run is we're going to have about a 20-minute interview, depending on how much I go off topic and waffle. And then there will be time at the end to have your questions answered. If you pop your questions in the Q&A box, the chat function is purely for event announcements. So keep an eye on there for kind of social media links to Lewis's work and that kind of thing. And then pop your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to those at the end. And just a little note to say that this chat isn't course specific. Anyone is welcome and anyone is invited to attend because it's relevant to everyone who's come to UE and everyone's welcome to be inspired by all of these speakers. So that also means that there won't be a my attendance code as well. It'll all be recorded and posted on the library website afterwards. Give us a few days, tech things take a while. So now we're going to crack on and introduce our speaker. So today we have Lewis Wedlock. He is an activist, academic and social psychologist. He works at centres around, all around the place, nationally, exploring and challenging structures that limit pathways to expressing magnificence. I'm super excited about this chat. It sounds so good. He is one of Britain's youngest lecturers and the co-creator of UE's Flourish module, which we'll hear more about, and creative director of Project Zazzy's Black Bristol. He has recently done a TEDx talk. We're all familiar with TEDx and probably spend maybe a little bit too much time watching all of those. The talk in Brighton on mental health and masculinity. Some of the projects that Lewis has been involved in include Black Bristol, which is an interactive timeline exploring some of Bristol's most important history. Flourish, he's a co-creator of Flourish, a personal development and positive psychology module delivered at UE. So some of you might be familiar with that. He's also the creator and host of Amplify, which is an extension of Black Bristol. So I've got some questions about that, so we'll cover that a little bit more. And the creator of Pinpoint Academia. So much there and such a broad range of things to cover. So let's crack on. So let's start from the very beginning. Do you have a moment, Lewis? Do you have a moment growing up which inspired you to follow the path you are on?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction as well. I think it's always, it's nice to hear, the work and kind of relive the work through introduction. So thank you very much for that. So a moment that inspired me to kind of jump into this work, I think that's a very difficult question. I would say that when I started within the sort of university space as a student, and I studied psychology or sociology at undergrad level, there was a moment with one of my lecturers, who's now my creative partner and business partner in different spaces, particularly around Flourish, that I saw Bill lecturing and I saw how he kind of like commanded the space. Bill Hill, William Hill is who I'm talking about here. And I saw him lecturing and I saw him just being able to speak on topics and then connect them with other topics and then bring it back to the topic. And he had this mastery of teaching and ability to connect with people in the space that for me, I looked at that for the first time and thought, I would quite like to do that at some point. That looks interesting. I was intrigued. And academia for me was something I kind of stumbled into. Like I wasn't really ever, planning to go to university. I just happened to kind of sign up to a course and then, whatever happened. But in that moment, I was like, whoa, like that looks interesting. And that style of delivery and that way of teaching was something that was like I want to do that in as many different spaces and places as possible. So that was the first thing that came to mind for me when you asked that question, and in terms of what drove me to be able to kind of work in the spaces that I'm so fortunate and grateful to be in. So yeah.
That's amazing, because that sounds like it's almost quite organic in that way. It wasn't like I went to university, I wanted to do this, and this is how it panned out. And actually, I think that's a more realistic path that a lot of people go on. They're kind of like, oh, I go to university, I'm not quite sure which path I'm going to take, but I'm going to do this. And it's so wonderful to hear that actually your experience at UWE is what has inspired you to create and work within these spaces. Was there a particular reason that you chose UWE in general?
I suppose yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I think I'm a Bristol boy anyway, and I love my city. I love where I'm from. I love the communities that I'm a part of, and the idea for me of moving away didn't really inspire me, no pun intended. But I felt like it was, I wanted to keep it within Bristol. And then I went to an open day and I looked at the course kind of breakdown for psychology. So I studied psychology with sociology. And I saw a module called Consciousness that was led by someone called Guy Saunders, who is a mentor and someone who kind of, again, like Bill, shaped me into the kind of person I am in the spaces that I'm in. And I saw this module called Consciousness, and I was like, what's that? And at the open day, they explained to me, we're looking at what makes the human experience. And that was it. I was like, where do you do conscious anywhere else? They're like, well, there's one in Portsmouth. And I was like, no, I want to study this, and I want to study under Guy, and I want to be, involved in this course. And I was, from that point on, like I said, I didn't plan to go to university, but at that open day, I was like, right, if I'm gonna go, then I want to study something like this. And it just so happened that I got to study under Guy during the last year of his teaching, before he retired, and got to work on and learn from him. So that was the driving force behind UWE, and my family have all kind of studied at UWE as well, so I was aware and familiar with the space and how good it was, and the experiences that came with it as well. So that was definitely a driving force. But it was the conscious module that was like, wait, we're doing this. We can study what human experience. I'm definitely wanted to look at that and explore that. So that was what drove me into applying to UWE and being in that space.
Did you look at any other universities that kind of you mentioned Portsmouth? Did you look closely at that module in other universities as well?
Not as I'm quite, when I have my mind and my eyes set on something, I tend to go 100% for that. And so once it became apparent to me, because I'm very big on like feel, and I went to some open days, as you should, and I've explored different spaces, but I felt most comfortable, and I felt most like if I was going to pursue a university sort of degree, then I would want to do it in a place like UWE, not just because of the conscious module, it was really cool, but because it just felt right and it felt good for me to be in that space. So that's what ultimately drove that. And like I said, I've looked at different places, but the feel and the interest for me to be involved in that space was strong enough for you to kind of take that as the option A and the only kind of pursuit for me. So yeah,
I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah, saying it's not just about the kind of academic side of things, it's about how the place makes you feel. And for some people that might be Oxford, for some people it might not be, and that's great. And actually from a personal level, that was the same for me. Returning to university as a mature student, UWE felt like the place that would be able to kind of cater to my needs. So yeah, that's fantastic. So you kind of mentioned a lot about the staff being like a huge part of being inspired to kind of follow the path that you're on. Could you just kind of like tell us a little bit more about how UWE and the staff, or maybe any of the support staff as well, helped you carve this path for yourself coming out of the uni?
Yeah, I know. I mean, 100%. I say often that, and it's not just because we're obviously having this conversation genuinely, that a lot of my career and what I've done and what I'm fortunate enough to be doing now at the age that I'm doing it at is a direct consequence of the people that were around me, that encouraged me, that believed in some of the stuff that I was trying to do and what I wanted to do. And, it's very easy to look at someone's goals and objectives and be like, that's not really realistic. At this point in the career, you want to do this, or you may want to build up to that, right? But people around me, like I said, Bill, Sir William Hill, the psychology team at UE in general, across the entirety of the teaching team, sociology as well, that were responsible for a large portion of my learning experience too, giving me the opportunities to come back into those spaces, and to trial things and to do things that weren't necessarily done before to the extent that they were done. Directly responsible for a lot of my success and for a lot of my my belief systems and my passions, direct consequence of the UE space, but specifically Bill, and what he did for me and what he continues to do for me today, believing in my ideas and supporting my ideas throughout the entirety of my university journey. Bill was one of the and it is still because he's all.
We just had a little freeze there. Would you mind going back to you were just saying you were talking about how Bill's kind of supported you in your journey, just like a couple of lines back. That would be great.
Yeah. So I mean, he's the person that I still go to this day for support and guidance on a range of different things, because he's always had my best interest. He's always had my my career development at the forefront of his actions and choices too, which I feel is very, rare for academic staff. And it's something that I see across the UE space, even me now being in the space, in those roles, the level that the staff will go to make sure that pathways is set and created is, I haven't seen it elsewhere. So Bill was that force for me and that driving force for sure.
That's amazing. It's so incredible to hear how much, not just like the university supported you with your ideas, but you also said your beliefs. And that's so important, that, you don't go to university and lose touch with what it is, your core fundamentals that makes you. And that leads quite nicely on to Black Bristol, one of your projects. And it said on your website that it's a response to the Black Lives Matter movement in before and also 2020 when it came back into the kind of modern sphere. Could you tell us a little bit about the project and why you feel it's so important?
Yeah, so for context, I am in the higher education space as an associate lecturer, but I'm also a mental health professional. So I work for a charity in Bristol called Off the Record, and within Off the Record, I work for a team called Project Zazie. Project Zazie are a team that are built up of devised of mental health professionals from non-white backgrounds in Bristol that work with young people from non-white backgrounds to support them, articulate, explore, and experiment with their magnificence. And the Black Bristol project is a Zazie project that I led on, which really was a direct response to a lot of young people in our city being frustrated with the history that they were being taught and the history that they weren't aware of, because Bristol is a very rich, has a very rich history where, development of society and culture is concerned, particularly when we look at the intersections between race, class, sexuality, etc. There's a lot in the city of Bristol that often does go unacknowledged and unidentified for the most part. So we want to focus on Black history, Black and Brown history specifically, and give our young people the opportunity to contact some of their history in a way that wasn't encroaching, because you can't just go in and change school curriculums. It's not how it works. But we could create a visiting curriculum that could be accessed at any time by just Googling blackbristol.com, by delivering, Black Bristol content in classroom sessions, going in and delivering sessions based off of the website to kind of fill that need for our young people to have access to that history. Because for me as a social psychologist, history and what we know of ourselves and what has gone before us is a really big contributor to our self-awareness, our self-confidence, our self-efficacy, how able we feel to do certain things in life. And so for us, it wasn't just a community project around history, it was a mental health intervention that existed to kind of give our young people elements of their identity back and give them the opportunity to collaborate with us over the years, creating, parts of their history and acknowledging parts of their history as we go along. So yeah, it's a timeline, and it's also a present day celebration and our articulation of our city and what makes our city, for me, one of the best places on earth. So that's what the Black Bristol Project is.
That's amazing. So people can access it online. It's like a resource that people can access, because you're totally right. It's really hard to change curriculums, however hard you argue that should happen in lots of different realms. It's not as simple as going, can you just pop this book on the syllabus now, please? It's really, really tricky. So it's amazing that you've kind of acknowledged that, and you haven't kind of gone, oh, these rigid guidelines, that's not, you've gone, what's the different way that we can help kind of mold that and move with that? That's amazing. And how does your work at Off the Record, which I am semi-familiar with, and as an academic, they both use the brain in a beautiful way, but how do those two things come together?
That's a excellent question. That really is a good question. And for me, they inform each other. So the work that I do in the academic space is informed directly by the observations and the work that I do in, mental health work, in community work, in youth work, in being embedded in my community as a social psychologist, someone that's interested in how society and culture works. So being with young people and working with young people informs my practice as an academic. But then at the same time, my process as an academic is informed by what I see and interact with. So that it's kind of like this beautiful, like, constant communication. And what I've learned through occupying both roles is that, theory and ideas are great, but they're often not quite the same in the reality of the people that you're working with. And that made me and is making me a sharper, professional in the spaces, because I see what part of theory is like working and what isn't, and where those gaps are. So it's a really beautiful kind of mix, and my work life is varied, but they very much inform, everything that I do. So challenging structure, and pathways to magnificence. The academic hat does that, but also the mental health and youth work role does that too. So they inform each other and are constantly kind of communicating with each other, at all times. So yeah, very much, on that sort of same wavelength.
I love that. If I could give you a huge round of applause, well, I will at the end. But as the people listening and also, also myself, we bury ourselves with academic text a lot when you're at university. Academic text, listening to all of these things. And sometimes it does lose its grasp on reality. I can hear some of my lecturers in my head screaming at me, but sometimes, it does feel like, who is this really for? Is this for you because you want to write it yourself? Or is it for the greater good? And it kind of sounds like what you're able to do from inhabiting both spheres is, like you said, bring those things together and listen to what people need, and then back that up with the academic side. And that's fantastic. I think we need more of that, definitely. The term that you keep using is magnificence. And can you explain, what does magnificence mean to you? Because for me, it's bringing up kind of images of ballrooms and gold and castles and all of this kind of thing. But obviously, that's not quite what you're not quite what you're after. And can you just, why do you use the term magnificence, and how is that so important to you?
Again, it's a really I love that question. I think for me, magnificence. I worked with a therapist and I still work with therapists, of course, in my profession, but I worked with a therapist when I was a young teen. And he talked about the world being a playground for people to express their magnificence. And that's something that I took with me, and it emerged or re-emerged, shall I say, when I started working in the youth work, mental health professional setting, and also in the education space. For me, magnificence is that innate essence within all of us that is there, is present, that can be tapped into through a process of exploration and coming into contact with things that ignite that spark. So it's not something that a few people have and kind of, possess and others don't. It's something that's within us all. I think the work that I do and the work that I'm fortunate enough to be involved in is about helping as many people as possible find what that magnificence is for them, finding that innate sense of purpose and excellence and drive and passion wherever it is that they feel that is and where that's located. So when I talk about magnificence and challenging structures that kind of, limit pathways to magnificence, that's what I'm talking about. How can we ensure that everyone taps into that sense of excellence and can use that to become the best versions of themselves? That's what I mean by magnificence.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And would you say, so you said you kind of came across the term when you were working alongside therapists. Could you say that actually, this is going to sound like a leading question, but whilst at UWE helping those members of staff that you met, did they help you access yours?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, the initial quote was something that I heard when I was like 16. I didn't really understand it. And then I understood it later on. But again, when we look at the kind of pathway that I took and ended up taking, for sure, because I think, like I said at the start, education wasn't something that I felt like was necessarily a career for me. But through that process of learning and finding those sparks and finding those moments that made me feel like, wow, I really want to do this and I really, really want to do this. That was something I wouldn't have said was a pathway for me, but it's the one that feels most truthful and most in line with who I am and what I want to do. So 100%. And that's only a credit to psychology and sociology teams that kind of walked me through that pathway.
Amazing. This might be a difficult question, but
Sure.
I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Of course.
Do you have, what are your top kind of thing? What are your top magnificence qualities that you have found in yourself?
I would say consistency. Showing up consistently for my young people within my own work and my own self. And again, being able to stick to something and continually push in relation to that because I'm connected with it and I know what my purpose is. I would say that. Empathy. I would say that I'm able to connect with a lot of young people that I work with quite quickly because I understand their experiences. I've lived their experiences. I know those shoes and what those shoes feel like. And it was only when I started working in that mental health space that I recognized that was a skill to be able to know what a person is feeling, or at least infer what a person is feeling based on my own experiences, but also knowing what that could feel like for them as well. And that really allows me to connect with people. And I would say it's a magnificent, in your words, a magnificent trait, but my analysis as well. So I really do try to look at things at the smallest detail and find out, and try and keep inspecting, keep looking and reflecting on what things mean and how they end up becoming the way that they've, become, whether that's people, culture, concepts. I would say that's a skill that has translated into many different spaces that I've been fortunate enough to kind of work in. So, yeah.
Amazing. That's so great. I'm so, blown away by those answers. That's so cool. Just a little quick reminder, guys, you can pop your questions in the Q&A box. I've got a few more myself, and then we're going to be heading over to you guys for your questions. And something that I think a lot of people might be interested in is public speaking. So like I mentioned in the introduction, you did your TEDx Brighton. And among that, you obviously do a lot of public speaking. It's something that a lot of people struggle with. And especially since COVID. Like I'm seeing it quite a lot with some of my peers, you know, in journalism, standing up in front of people, and whether it's giving a presentation or approaching people for interviews and things like that, it's really tricky. How is it something that's always come quite easy to you, or is it something that you've developed? You're shaking your head. Is something how have you developed your skill for public speaking?
So to answer the question, absolutely not. It wasn't something that was like was always good at. I did drama and things when I was younger, but playing a role and being truthful to you are totally different things, and were totally different things for me. So I think in terms of public speaking, practice was the thing that I did the most. So when I first started teaching, I often say jokingly to the people I taught at the start, I apologize, because you would have got such a better experience now than what you did at the start. But I think public speaking, literally and figuratively, is a process of finding your voice, and that can only come through practice. So the more you practice and the more you sit in them uncomfortable situations, and the more you kind of walk away and think, I want to improve on that, I want to do that. That was something that really helped me. So I tend to watch everything I do back, except the TEDx talk. I haven't seen that yet, but I tend to watch things back and, okay, I want to do that better next time, or I want to, I want to deliver it this way, or I want to maybe spend more time with this. I watch my stuff back, and I tend to nitpick a little bit and do that. But most importantly, I think it's a process of just understanding as well that, another piece of advice I got was, when you speak from a position of truth, it's hard to feel nervous when you know that what you're speaking and how you're speaking comes from that place. So that's something that I take into a lot of the work that I do as well, is that, am I speaking from the position of truth? Do I believe what I'm saying? Do I truly resonate with the words that are coming out of my mouth? Because I do. And when I step into those spaces, whether it's a TEDx stage or a lecture hall or a community space of 20 people, I know that what I'm speaking is truthful to me, and that's kind of all that matters. So those are some tips.
So it's almost like the Magnificence element and the public, they almost like come together in a way. Like you kind of almost can't have the confidence of public speaking without kind of finding your magnificence and your truth. They kind of come together quite organically. Yeah,
and don't get it twisted as well. Maybe to say as well, it's absolutely 100% okay to be nervous, even at an experience level. So like a lot of time people will think, oh, this guy doesn't get nervous anymore because he's done this and that. Absolutely not. I do get nervous. I do still feel a bit like, oh God, I don't know about this. And that is a norm. That is the normality of speaking in public. So don't feel like that ever goes away, because it often doesn't. But that is a good thing for me anyway, because it shows that there is an element of care, and that I'm wanting to kind of do the best job possible. So just add that in.
Yeah, definitely. And on the subject of nerves, for some people, nerves come through in your voice quite a lot, and maybe like the shakes if you're holding a pen or something like that. Yeah. Do you have any kind of tips if you're standing in the wings, or you're standing behind the door before you're going in to give your lecture or whatever? Do you have any kind of like practical tips to get over those kinds of things?
Kind of practical, kind of maybe kind of not. Like if you watch my TEDx talk, the camera actually picked up what I do. I didn't realize that my mic was on, but before I speak publicly, I always say, guide me. So I say, I point to my chest and I say, guide me. So it's kind of me just asking the divine power, whoever that is and whatever that looks like to you, to speak through me, and to just kind of just say, okay, cool, I'm just going to do it now, and I'm trusting that I'm going to be able to kind of do what I need to do. In terms of practical, make sure you're hydrated before, because dry mouth is a real thing, and it doesn't matter how prepped you are. When you start feeling that mouth go a little bit dry, you're like, damn, I should have hydrated a little bit more. Taking deep breaths in between, like don't feel like you need to rush everything. Like, another mentor of mine, Mr. G, would often say to me, slow down. You've got all the time in the world up there. Like, do what you need to do, and take a breath, steady yourself, and find that pocket. So don't be afraid to take a sip of water, to take a deep breath, to kind of just sit up there for a little bit. That helps calm those nerves as well. So those are some tips.
Amazing. Yeah, really, really good tips. And just my last question before we head over to the audience questions.
Yeah.
How did UE help you prepare for graduating, and how did that help you on the path that you're on?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I was aware of numerous different opportunities that were present in the sort of community spaces. I was aware of opportunities that could be available to me, pathways that are available. And I think for me personally, what was the most, helpful was, like I said at the start, the university being able to listen to my ideas, which really, as a 22-year-old at the time, or 21-year-old at the time, saying I want to come back and teach quite quickly, quite soon, to even humor me in that space and be like, okay, what is it you want to do and how do you want to do it? And actually opening that dialogue up was something that really helped me, create the platforms, also the confidence in myself to be able to do the things that I do now and feel like I can, do things that I set my mind to. So having that sort of validated and heard for me at that point in my career was absolutely massive and instrumental, and allowed me to kind of continually ask things that I shouldn't really be asking for at this point in my career, but still finding a way to kind of get my foot in the door and still finding ways to do things that I enjoy that aren't compromising who I am, but also just really trying to push the envelope as much as possible. So that's how they help me.
Amazing. And that definitely came with the confidence to ask as well.
100%.
Like not sitting back and waiting for those opportunities to fall in your lap. It's literally like, this is what I want. How can you help me get there? I think that's a really important lesson. We can't wait for magic to happen. You have to make it happen. Amazing. So now, enough of my questions. We're going to head over to what the people want. So, question number one. What was your experience when starting university? Was it positive, straight off the cuff, or did it take you a while to find your footing? Brilliant question.
Very, very good question. Definitely took me a while. So I tell a story all the time. So I came to university kind of on a kind of whim, in a sense. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I picked subjects that I felt like I was good at in college, and there was an air of dare I say, arrogance, within me at the time that I felt like, oh no, this is I can do. It's just like A level, right? So when I started university, I wasn't performing as well as I should have. My expectations weren't being met, and it was a deeply humbling experience. And I found the initial switch into a different work style quite difficult. So, I often say the first few months of my university experience were really, really trying to find my feet. And it was frustrating, and it made me feel like, am I even supposed to be at this place at this point in time? And again, being surrounded by people like Bill, like Guy, but at that point in my career, particularly Bill would say to me, look at the feedback, or, just keep looking, keep studying, and keep improving incrementally. And I found my feet through that process and ended up graduating with what I graduated with, doing really, really well. But yeah, of course, academically finding my feet for sure, personally finding my feet, like being in a space where there's so many new people and there's so many new perspectives and ideas, it can often feel a bit disorientating, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. It's going to take you time to acclimatize, and everyone's timing is different. So 100%, the first few months, first term was that finding the feet. And then our flourish module, we talk about within our cycle, we talk about arriving and then surviving as being the first two parts of the cycle. So arriving is when you enter a new space and you're just kind of find out what the hell's going on, where is everything, what we do and how we do it, what's the rules of this space. And then surviving is about learning the basic rules to survive in the space, to get along, attend your lecture on time, get coursework in, etc. And just doing that kind of bare minimum to get by. And that's not a bad thing. That's getting your feet secured and finding that, your footing in the space. So absolutely, definitely first term was an interesting process, but it was, a process that was needed and a process that, ultimately informed what I ended up doing. So yeah.
Amazing. And I think it's also important to register that everyone's in the same boat. Like, even if people look like they are sailing through it, they are not. Like, we all just put on that face. So yeah, and UWE's got lots of great support out there, and just make sure that you ask for it if you need it, for sure. Amazing. I love that surviving. Those two kind of tick that, and that's the most important thing. Love that. When you are so proactive and have created so much to be proud of, is it hard to maintain? How do you balance it with normal life and stop feeling overwhelmed? Wow.
It's another great question. So yeah, there was periods in my career where putting the foundations in place for the Black Bristols, for the Flourish modules, for the Amplify, for the other, projects, the Pinpoint, for example. There was a point in putting those things together where I did burn out quite massively, and there was a point where I needed to really reassess what was important to me and what it was that I wanted to pursue. So all of the projects together looks like this guy never rests, this guy never does anything but work. I can assure you that the projects that you see me work on are allocated specific times to work on them. So, right now at this point in the year, Black Bristol is the focus because Black History Month is coming up. That's where my sort of energy goes. When the academic term starts, I switch back into sort of Flourish, content development, and focus on that project. Pinpoint and working with different. That's kind of more sporadic. If people want me to come in and do stuff, I will do stuff, but I will make sure there's time for me to rest and recover. So it can be difficult when you're trying to create and accumulate lots of different projects. But I learned that just because there's lots of different projects doesn't mean that all these different projects have to be worked on at the same time. And I think that process of being intentional with my time and really setting aside time to work on things with 100% effort, but also not being afraid to take a rest and take a break. That's how I stopped, myself from being overwhelmed. And I'm in the best mental space in my career, that I've been in for a long time. And, it's created some of my best work, whether that is the TEDx, or whether that is the top secret Black Bristol stuff that is coming next month. I can't say anything, but know that it's massive. It's big stuff. That's come from rest, knowing what my limits are and where to work with it.
That's fantastic. That's really, really good advice. And that kind of leads on to another question I've got here of what helps you stay focused?
What helps me stay focused? I have a team around me, and I say team, my team Zazie, people, my colleagues, my family, because we call ourselves, we are a family. We really look out for each other. And there's that element of people saying to me, hey, you've done quite a few 12-hour ones, you might need to rest. Or how are you? Take time, don't forget to rest, Lou, make sure you're resting. So there's the work element. It's the same for Flourish and working with Bill saying you need to rest and take time. Having that accountability network around me allows me to stay focused and know that rest is essential and that I need to be taking more rest. Obviously my family and my close circle keep me focused, because they were the people that and are the people that have allowed me to really pursue the things that I'm interested in and that I love dearly. And I've never, ever once in life said to me, oh, don't do that, you should be doing this instead. So they help me stay focused because they just give me that space and know how I work and know how I am to let him do what he needs to do. That's where he's happiest and that's what he loves to do. So family play a huge role in that as well. And more specifically within me, routines and making sure that I'm getting enough rest. I'm, moving, I'm exercising and making sure that my sleep patterns and my hydration patterns and stuff are consistent, because I think we often overlook our biological systems when it comes to staying focused and staying consistent. I certainly do. So taking time to ensure that is in place is really, really important.
Amazing. So kind of the holistic side of things and the functional side of things and the practical side of things, they all need to come together to work. Incredible. Right. Really good question here. Assuming that the process for finding magnificence differs for each individual, what is the most common first step we should take to make sure we're on the right path? Oh, yeah. That's such a good question.
That is a Brilliant question. And I think the answer, it's an open-ended one, but it's intentional. So bear that in mind. The first step to finding magnificence starts with finding you. And that may sound a little bit kind of cliche or like one of those motivational videos, but what we know from Flourish and what we know from community work as well, what I've learned from the community work is self-awareness is the first step to contacting magnificence. Like, what makes us us? What are our driving forces? What things motivate us? What things don't motivate us? What things get us angry? What things make us our happiest? What things do we want to see changed in the world? How do we want to see them change? Engage in that process of questioning and critically reflecting enables you to start finding those elements of magnificence, because you're absolutely right. Everyone's magnificence is different. It's found in different locations and spaces. But what we found is that process of inquiry and reflection and beginning that pathway to exploring yourself with as much curiosity as the subjects you're embarking on in university or in wider life gives you that pathway to locating that magnificence and exploring what makes you at the core level. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, we all know what we're doing this afternoon. Yes, these, yes, yep. What is something you haven't done yet, but would really like to explore further in the future? Oh, but that's a long list. Like, there's so much.
Yeah, I mean, so the TEDx was a big one for me. Like, it was a big career goal, for example. So I really wanted to do a TEDx, and that would have been the answer, if I didn't do one earlier in the year. I think now what I would want to do, a book. I think that's the next thing. I think a book or a piece of work that kind of brings together all the work that I've been doing over the past few years. People are pushing me and nudging me to do it, and I do want to do it. And I think that's the next big challenge is a book, whether it's on masculinity, whether it's on mental health, whether it's on personal development, wherever the energy is. So I'll go to it. But I think the next big thing is a book for sure.
I mean, I think everything that you've spoken about, and I'm sure there's a lot more, would be fantastic, for a book, and definitely, something that people are really interested in the moment. And we haven't quite got time to go into it, but the topic of masculinity from a book written by a man, I think it would just, especially something in Bristol that people would respond really well to, and is about time. I think actually a lot of the things that you're talking about, it's the right time for it, because we're in such a moment of flux in everything. We could all do in 2023, we could all do with having off, but I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. And last, I think this is the last question from the audience. So if anyone's got anything, get it in really, really quickly. How do you deal with rejection in a professional viewpoint?
I can summarize this in a sentence, but I don't mean this to make it seem as if it's past stuff, but the lesson that I learned is rejection isn't a piece of evidence that informs a sense of inadequacy. It's a stepping stone to the next level of your personal development. So I view rejection as, I love rejection and I love failure, because it allows me to really kind of find out where the next development zones are and where I can kind of sift into that and continually develop myself. So that's how I personally handle rejection. It's looking at it as a stepping stone to the next level, as opposed to evidence of my own inadequacy.
Oh God, yes, 100%. I could not agree more. And that's such a good one a good question to end on, actually. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, if there are any other questions for me, and that you kind of want to pose them my way, I think my links are in the chat. So please feel free to drop me a follow and send me some messages, and I'm happy to try to wrap up some of those questions. So, but no, it's been a real pleasure to chat to you. Honestly, I've really, really enjoyed this. So thank you for the invite, and thank you to everyone in the chat as well. It was a really, really, really enjoyable space. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. So just to reiterate, Lewis's contacts and LinkedIn's and Twitter's and stuff, they're all in the chat. So yeah, make sure you hit him up, follow, pester him about the book. next year's
Please
Christmas
do.
present sorted. You're like, excuse me, you said you were going to write a book and I want it now. So yeah, all of that kind of stuff. If for whatever reason, like your tech glitched or whatever, this recording will be up on the library website probably in the next couple of days, where you can also find the talk with Lindsay Parietti, which was on Monday or Tuesday, I think it was. I can't even remember what day it is today. But that was fascinating. Filmmaker and journalist. That was a really good one. And if you're struggling at the moment or anything, or you need some support with anything at all, remember there are the UE Bristol support services, and they are there to help you, and just take full advantage of that. And yeah, that's everything for today. So thank you again so much, Lewis. I'm inspired, so I hope everybody else is as well. And the next talk, I believe, is next week, but head over to the UE library page and you'll be able to find out more about that. So thank you, everyone, and bye for now. Thank you, Lewis.
See you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.